All right, now we are in project procurement management. Let's discuss about it. For many of the PMP aspirants, project procurement management is one of the difficult knowledge area, especially if you do not have a practical experience in managing the procurement in the PMBOK way. Then this topic may seems to be a little difficult. So you may want to pay a little more attention than usual. But don't worry, we will try to make it as easy as possible with a lot of examples as usual. So, we will have first a small introduction with example, then we will move to the definition. All right? A question to you. This time from automobile industry, Ferrari. Do you think Ferrari makes all their components that are used in their car? Not just Ferrari, for that matter, any organization. Do you think those organization makes all their subassembly and subproducts? You know what I mean? Let's go back to Ferrari. None of the car manufacturer makes their own tires, right? The tires are bought from other organizations who are experts in making tires. Even Ferrari does not make tires. So, what do they do? There can be two scenarios. Scenario 1. Ferrari details the technical requirements of tires that are used in their cars. They look out in the market for the tires that meets the technical specification. Let's say Michelin, a popular tire manufacturer's model number MI8842 meets Ferrari's technical requirement, which is readily available in the market. So what Ferrari do? Go and buy the tire and use it in their cars. Okay, if it's just one or two tires, then this is fine. Go to the market, buy the tire and fit in the car. But how about if they need in thousands? Normally, organizations will have agreement with their suppliers to supply X number. It can be in the form of raw material, semi-finished goods, or finished goods. In this example, Ferrari and Michelin will have an agreement. Michelin to supply n number of tires for every month for the next so many months for Y cost. This is one possible scenario. Let's take another scenario. Let's say there is no tire that are readily available in the market that meets Ferrari's technical specification. What Ferrari can do? In this situation, what Ferrari can do is they will send out their technical specification to all the potential tire manufacturers. Invite them to be their partner to supply tires as per the technical specification. The tire manufacturers who are interested and also capable to meet the technical specification will contact Ferrari. There can be n number of suppliers. Ferrari will evaluate each one of them. The evaluation can be on many criteria such as cost, timely delivery, brand name, past history, etc. etc. Whoever meets the evaluation criteria, Ferrari will make a legal contract with them to supply n number of tires each month for the next n number of months for Y cost. This is about scenario number 2. So, whatever we discussed so far is a super simplified process of procurement. But at high level, these steps followed in any organization during procurement. So, synonyms for the word procurement is obtaining something, buy something, purchase something. In a project, you procure a product or service from outside the project team. In this example, Ferrari purchased tire from Michelin. By the way, in the PMBOK guide, the process of procurement will be from the viewpoint of obtaining something from outside the project. So, the project procurement management includes the process necessary to purchase or acquire products, service, or results needed from outside the project team. In this knowledge area, our discussion will be from the viewpoint of buyer, that is, your project team buys something from outside unless otherwise specified, just like in Ferrari. A complex project may involve managing multiple contractors simultaneously or in sequence. In such cases, each contract life may begin and end during any phase of the project life cycle. Now, a fundamental question. What is the difference between agreement and contract? If you remember our very first discussion, you can answer to this. Agreement in simple terms is agreeing for something. When the agreement is in written, formal and legally bound, then it's called contract. Contract is a legal document, but agreement is not. So, Every contract is a type of agreement, but agreement isn't necessarily a contract. An agreement need not to be in return, but a contract normally in return and registered. A project charter is typically an example of what? Yes, you are right. A project charter is a typical example of agreement. It does not contain any legal obligations. Some more examples of agreements are internal memo, letter of agreement, and project agreements. So, when there is a contract, all the communication such as correspondence, clarifications, notification related to contract, etc. must be in formal return. This is to make sure that there is a record for all the communication. This might be useful in future in case of any arbitration. The word arbitration means settlement. When there is an issue between buyer and the seller, one should have all the proofs to prove that his side is correct. Project procurement management has a lot of legal obligations to be followed. So, we will come across a lot of legal terms in this knowledge area. You need to pay more attention, especially if you are a student from outside the United States. Some of the terminologies and practices may look new to you, so try to learn them quickly. Since the contracts are legally binding documents, there will be more extensive approval process at various levels. Also, legal department may get involved. In fact, this is the knowledge management area which has significant legal obligations and penalties tied than in any other process. Why so much of review and approval? It's just to ensure that the contract adequately describes the product, service, or results that are agreed to provide by the seller. Also, the document is in compliance with the law and regulations regarding the procurement of the country. The contract document should be written in legal languages. Contract should be clearly state the deliverables and results expected, including any knowledge transfer from the seller to buyer. It should not be ambiguous. Remember, anything which is not there in the contract cannot be legally enforced. Since the contract is a legally binding document, failure on either side will be addressed and remedied legally in the court. In international contracting, the legal jurisdictions under which the contract will be administered are clearly spelled out in the contract. Typically, in most of the organization, there will be a team who takes care of procurement activity. So, the project manager is not expected to be an expert in procurement management laws and regulations, but he or she should be familiar enough to manage the procurement process and make right decision. He should be able to read, understand, and manage contract related documents. Also, should help to create a new one. The project managers are typically not the authorized person to sign in any legal documents relevant to procurement. It is reserved to the respective authorities. In the organization policies, it will be defined clearly. The dedicated procurement team will negotiate, purchase, and sign in the contract. This is called centralized purchasing. Smaller organizations or startup companies may operate without dedicated purchasing, contracting, or procurement department. In those cases, the project manager may be the purchasing authority. He or she directly negotiates and signs contracts directly. This is called decentralized purchasing. In decentralized purchasing, the project manager is responsible for not only creating the procurement management plan, but also for conducting and monitoring the procurement related work. The departments that deals with the procurement are named such as purchasing, contracting, procurement, or acquisition, depending on the organization type and the country. When there is a transaction with the external to the project, they should be legally bound, typically in the form of agreement. All right, let's look at some of the types of procurement documents. Depending on the application area, it can be called as agreements, contracts, purchase orders, memorandum of understanding, or internal service agreements, SLAs. In the sample examination, any of these terms may be used, so be prepared. Depending upon the type of service or product to be delivered, the type of contract is chosen. These agreements describes the relationship between two parties, the buyer and the seller. Depending on the application area, the seller may be identified as a contractor, vendor, service provider, or supplier. It can happen that the seller whom you identified to provide product or service may outsource some or all the work to another seller. Okay, let's spend some time to understand the content of a contract. The procurement statement of work, SOW, and terms and conditions of the contract are the key input in many agreements. The procurement SOW may have other names such as technical statement of work. It can contain inputs such as major deliverables, key milestones, cost objectives, change approval process, etc. You may procure not only product or service, even the human resources from outside organizations. If it's a product, an agreement could be as simple as mentioning purchase of certain items of defined quantities. For example, 10,000 bricks of standard size to be delivered by August second week. If it's a human resource, then you can mention the number of people for so many hours at specified rate. For example, 2 Java developers for 3 months at $8,000 per month. The procurement document can be simple or it can be detailed and complex. In multi-year international construction contracts, it used to be very detailed. You may find so many clauses specified along with multiple annexures. The document should comply with the national and international laws of procurement. A special attention should be given to the local law upon contracts in the enforceability. It must cover all the terms and conditions. Depending on the complexity, a contract document may have multiple appendix and or annexures that covers every aspects of the procurement. Let's quickly understand make or buy decision. During the planning phase, the project scope is analyzed to understand whether the entire project can be completed internally or any work or deliverable to be outsourced. Not necessarily the entire package, but could be even a small portion too. This is called make or buy decision. In our Ferrari example, Ferrari decided not to make the tires, but to get it from outside the organization. Once the decision is made to procure goods or service from an outside source, the project manager prepares procurement steps. Centralized contracting. When the project manager himself directly worked on the procurement, then it's decentralized purchasing. I hope you remember it. We discussed a minute back. Now, let's get into a little more detail. In a centralized contracting environment, there is a procurement department, and the procurement manager reports to the head of procurement department at organizational level, not to the project manager. It's a typical functional organization setup. I hope you remember our earlier discussion about functional organizations. The procurement manager may handle multiple procurements of many projects in parallel. As a project manager, you should know what authority the procurement manager has and how the procurement department is organized. Let's talk about the advantages of centralized procurement or purchasing. Higher level of expertise, standardized practice across the organization, so improved efficiency. Team members will be provided specialized training, shared lessons learned, so there will be a continuous improvements in the skill. Team members will have clearly defined career path. Let's look at some of the disadvantages. One procurement manager may work on many projects in parallel, so he or she may not be able to give any special attention to your project. He may not have enough time to understand the unique needs of your project. You have no control over the process or resources. When answering the examination questions, assume that you are working on a centralized contracting environment unless otherwise stated. Let's talk about the project manager's role in procurement. At a high level, the project manager is responsible for facilitate the creation of a plan for the overall procurement process and procurement management plan. A plan for how each contract will be managed. It's called procurement strategy, and a description of the work to be done by each seller. It's called Procurement Statement of Work. Let's get into a little more detail. A project manager should be assigned from both the buyer and the seller's side before the contract is signed. This is very, very crucial. Often it's missed out to assign a project manager from the seller side, so make sure about the assignment of project manager. Make sure the contract includes all the scope of the work, all the project management requirements, such as who should attend the meeting, what sort of report to be shared across, what should be the model of communication, frequency of communication, etc. Understand what contract terms and conditions means. This will help you to plan and manage the monitoring and controlling of procurement and make intelligent decision. Identify risk and risk management plan related to procurement. Tailor the contract to the unique needs of the project. Many organizations have defined the procurement management process. Getting the vendor involved may take time. The project manager should have a good understanding about the procurement management process so that while estimating the project schedule, procurement time can be estimated more accurately. There is a cost associated for each requirement. Make sure these are budgeted in the project cost. Get involved in procurement team. Assist and support the procurement team as required throughout the project. Get involved during contract negotiation to protect the relationship with the seller. Managing procurement requires legal knowledge, negotiation skills, and an understanding of the procurement process. Project manager is expected to be familiar with all these aspects of procurement. Often, contentious negotiation makes the seller feel that they have to give up too much in profit, or they agreed to some of the terms and conditions that they do not like in order to win the contract. This can create a win-lose relationship with the procurement manager and with the seller, which can negatively affect a project. By staying involved in the negotiation, the project manager can promote the best interest of the project. During the delivery, make sure that all the work in the contract is done, including inspection, reporting, and other legal deliverables, such as including the release of ownership of material, technical scope, drawings, etc. In the Ferrari example, we discussed that when no tires available in the market that can fulfill the technical requirements, Ferrari started looking out the vendor who can provide the tires which meets the technical specification. Let's say there are 5 vendors shown interest. All the vendors will be called for a meeting to explain about the technical requirements. This is called as bidder conference. We will have a detailed discussion shortly. So you as a project manager should get involved in bidding and proposal process. More than the procurement manager, you as a project manager will be able to clarify all the technical and project management related questions during the bidder conference. Do not ask for something which is not in the contract without making a corresponding change to the contract. Work with the procurement department to manage necessary changes to the contract. All right, what is the role of a project management team in procurement? It is the project management team's responsibility to make certain that all procurements meet the specific need of the project and organizational procurement policies are followed. Now, let's talk about the role of procurement department. It's always a good idea to review the scope of the work for its completeness by the procurement department. This reviewed and finalized document is called as, you are right, procurement statement of work. The procurement manager will determine what type of contract, bid document, and statement of work should be used. If there is no procurement department in the organization, then the responsibility of managing procurement to be done by the project manager. Now, let's look at some of the general rules which can help you to score well in the sample exam. Before answering to the question, understand whether the question is from seller or from buyer's point of view. If there is no point of view is mentioned, then assume it's from correct buyer's point of view. Contract is a legally bound document. So The seller must perform all the agreed deliverables in the contract document. Upon failing to do so, it will be considered as breach of contract. Any arbitration, mediation, litigation must be handled legally through court. Any change from the contract must be requested in written, formal. Since the contract is already baselined, if anything over and above the capacity of the seller, then he has all the rights to deny the change requested. So, the buyer and the seller have to come to a common agreement on what to be done regarding the requested changes. Let's discuss the major trends in software tools, risk, process, logistics, and technologies related to procurement. First, the advancement in software tools. The online tools make it easy for the buyer and the seller to interact seamlessly. In the portal, the buyer can advertise his requirements and the seller can reply back. In the construction engineering field, business information model BIM software are gaining popularity. They reduce significant amount of time and money, both planning and execution of procurement related activities. They do reduce the usage of construction material as well. Large companies, even the government across the world started using BIM on their large projects. Risk management trend is also changing rapidly. It's not possible for the seller to manage all the risks in a contract. The buyer are required to accept when the seller do not have control over them. This makes the corporates to change their buying policies. As a result, in contracts, the risks that to be managed by the buyers are specially mentioned. There are changes in contracting process as well. Nowadays, large projects involve multi-million dollar are becoming common. So, there is no point in relying only on the local contractors. As a result, there is an increasing trend in involving international multiple contractors. So, contract terms also getting changed accordingly. Not only the primary source of supply is identified early in the project, but secondary, which is the backup sources, also identified. On one hand, just in time JIT becoming more and more popular, which reduces the cost of project. But on the other hand, there are items that may take much longer time to procure. For those items, the lead time is not in months. They can be even sometimes in years. So, the contract starts when the high-level requirements are identified at the top-level design. Normally, when there is an international contract purchase involved, a minimum percentage of material bought from local vendors. This reduces the cost of the material and also reduces the cost in logistics and supply chain. Along with even the risks get minimized. Nowadays, publicly funded projects are under more scrutiny than ever. For example, in construction project, the webcams are installed with the live streams. So the people know what's going on the site. Trial engagements. A small sample or small portion of contract is awarded to the new seller on trial basis. Based on their performance, the contract volume may go bigger. All right, that wraps up the overview. Let's move to the process.